So Chapter 11 covers primarily industry, so we'll be focusing on a lot of secondary economic activities. So before our week-long Thanksgiving break, we finished up Chapter 10, and we really focused in on agriculture, which is primarily primary economic activities. But in addition to the economic sector activities, we also talked about some of the manufacture of food, the storage of food, the transport of food. We talked about agribusiness, which does address secondary and tertiary economic sectors as well. So industry is going to be mostly the building of things, right? Industry and manufacture. So it's mostly going to be secondary economic sector activities, although we will be talking about some primary and tertiary economic activities as well, because you can't have one without the other. So the modern concept of industry today means that you are making things in a factory. And this would have started in the second half of the 18th century during the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution began in northern England and southern Scotland, and then it would have diffused slowly, right? It didn't diffuse all at once. It didn't make its way across the world immediately. But the Industrial Revolution diffused across the world. And when we talk about the Industrial Revolution, we really talk about the improvement to industrial technology that transformed the process of manufactured goods. So, for example, the steam engine, invented in 1769, really kind of powered the Industrial Revolution. Before the Industrial Revolution, most manufacturing was made in what's called cottage industries or home-based industries. So fabric would have been made in many people's homes, and they would have sold it in a village to a market, and maybe would have gotten sold to a middleman. Maybe they would have transported it to a larger city. But so you would have had people with looms in their home, or people sewing clothes in homes, or sewing leather in homes. So all these things would have been done in what's called cottage-based industries. And with the Industrial Revolution, it changed it to you were actually working in a large factory with many different people. Some of the first industries to be impacted were the iron industry, which makes sense, right? If we were starting to make large-scale manufactured items, modern-day manufacturing, we needed iron. Iron later is used to make steel. Coal. Coal was an industry that was impacted heavily by the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, which makes sense because many of the first steam engines were in fact powered by burning coal. We would have transported iron, used iron to make railroads, so then transportation was then impacted. So the steam engine, both in boats and primarily the railroad. And then we had the textile industry that was transformed pretty quickly. And then later we had chemicals and then food processing. So these are the major industries that were impacted. And you can see here the first railroad was opened by 1826, and these regions here were the heart of the Industrial Revolution. And then it would have diffused throughout the UK. And after it diffused throughout the UK, it diffused through most of Central Europe, and then out to Spain and Portugal, out to Eastern Europe, Northern Europe, and of course the US. Today, industry is concentrated in three main regions in the world: Europe, North America, and East Asia. Although that is changing. So keep in mind that we have places in South Asia and Southeast Asia that are manufacturing centers, and Brazil is also becoming a hub. So today it's concentrated in these regions, but that's rapidly changing. So each region accounts for roughly a quarter of the world's total industrial output. And then you have Brazil, so Latin America, and India, South Asia, account for industrial output outside of these regions. And so let's talk a little bit about industrial centers in Europe. And you should be familiar with, in general, where most industry occurs in Europe. So you've got a center here still in the UK, going from Glasgow all the way down to just north of London, Birmingham. So mostly in Scotland, but down to the northern part of England. Northeastern Spain is also part of the industrial center. The Rhine River Valley, the Mid-Rhine Valley, and then the Po Basin in Italy, the Silesia Basin. Over here in the Ukraine, we have the Donetsk area. The reason it's located here, heavy coal mining. And then throughout Russia, you have St. Petersburg, Moscow, Volga, the Ural Mountains. The Ural Mountains are a heavy center of mining as well. So since they have so many minerals, they have access to the raw materials they need for industrial centers. And so as you look at this, you're going to see that industry is going to be located where it can be located near where you're going to have raw materials. So if you have lots of minerals, like in the Ural Mountains, that makes sense to have an industrial center there. You have access to the raw materials you need to build things. Same thing like in Italy, here you've got access to the materials to make textiles, so access to raw materials. The other thing that's going to attract a center of industry would be access to not just mineral resources, but also energy resources. So coal mines here, lots of coal means lots of electricity. In the Po Basin, you have lots of hydroelectric electricity, which makes it really cheap. Another thing that might make you have an industrial center might be access to cheap labor. So if you have people who low-wage labor, or if you're a market that needs highly skilled labor, you're going to be located near centers where you can find lots of labor. You're also going to have to be located near transportation centers. So look at the Rhine River Valley, right? The Rhine River Valley and the Mid-Rhine has access to major cities, has access to labor, has access to transportation, ports in a river that can get it out into the sea. Look here, northeastern Spain, access to ports. The centers in UK, access to transportation, access to ports. And the other thing is access to consumers. And so you want to make things where you have the ability to sell them. And so some industry might be located out near like a more rural area like the Ural Mountains, but many centers are located right here in the hearts of populated areas, because if you're making things, you also need to be able to transport them to people who will buy them. In the U.S., our manufacturing centers are up here by the Great Lakes in general. The Great Lakes afford us the ability to transport materials, right? So the Great Lakes can go through a river out into the Atlantic Ocean, so you've got access to ports. You've got your Boston, your New England centers here, your Middle Atlantic, so your New York, Baltimore, Philadelphia area. And then you've got access out here on the West Coast in California. Again, our North American industrial areas are going to be located near raw materials. They'll be located with access to markets, access to transportation, and again, access to labor. These areas have changed slightly over time, but you'll still find many manufacturing centers here, here, and here. In East Asia, again, you're going to have proximity to either raw materials, transportation, markets, or labor, or all three. So notice that most of these centers are right here near the ocean or near a river, so you can transport the materials. Transporting materials means you're also going to have probably airports, so you've got the ability to bring workers in if you need them. Large cities means you've got access to markets and access to labor, and access to energy, because the grids, right, the electrical grids are set up large in cities to handle that kind of power output. All right, and that is it for key issue 1.